headline story. Solving Nigeria's electricity challenges. Now Nigerians may be on the verge of paying more for electricity. The Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission said it is concluding the Extraordinary Tariff review process for the 11 electricity distribution companies. But this comes in the midst of lingering issues about generation, distribution, transmission, and costing. We'll get into the details right after this. This is Business Edge. I'm Tolulokwe Adeleru Balogun. Welcome. The regulator of Nigeria's power sector, the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission, NERC, says it is concluding the extraordinary tariff review process for the country's distribution companies. This means that the cost of electricity in Nigeria is set to increase soon. Now, the commission said the review was part of the provisions of the Electric Power Sector Reform Act and is being carried out in instances where industry parameters have changed from those used in the operating tariffs to such an extent that a review is urgently required to maintain the viability of the industry. NERC says the reviews would put into consideration changes in inflation, foreign exchange, gas prices, and available generation capacity. The commission said it would also consider capital expenditure required to evacuate and distribute the available generated capacity in accordance with the Act and other extant industry rules. The public and stakeholders have 21 days to send in their feedback on the proposed reviews. Now, joining me is Daniel Wilbert. He is the Chief Financial Officer at Green Village Electric Projects. GVE is an indigenous major player in the renewable energy sector here in Nigeria. Daniel, thank you so much for joining me on Business Edge. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Tolu.
All right, so one of the big issues has been metering, and many customers will pay for meters, they don't receive them. Estimated billing continues to be one of the biggest issues in the Nigerian electricity sector. There has been finger pointing from government and the discos. But then we've also seen tariffs go up. And while the average Nigerian is not earning any more, many have pointed out that the true cost of electricity may make it too expensive for the average Nigerian to be able to afford. So we had a report that came out recently that said that Nigeria spends a minimum of $1.5 billion annually subsidizing electricity. What's the compromise, before we even get into the metering, but what's the compromise between what the cost of electricity is and what is being paid in the interim, as we might say?
Okay, thank you, Tolu, for having me here. So if you see what's going on in the sector, right, it's obvious that the prices are not cost reflective of what it should be. And this is why the EPSRA has brought NEC and the DISCOs and GENCOs together to see a more reflective cost tariff, which has been discussed to be implemented in July. Now, so how do we see this? I think the issue of subsidy is something in the power sector is something that's not really been discussed much. We speak about those in the petroleum sector and all that, right? But we've almost over time overlooked that for the power sector. I don't think we should be subsidizing power, not at this point. I mean, the government is literally going through
difficult times.
Difficult times, right? I was about to say financial meltdown.
You call it what it is. Call it what it is.
But I don't see them being able to subsidize this anymore. Something has to give at some point, right? So for me, it's a no-brainer. I mean, looking at it from the perspective of investors, it's a no-brainer. Something has to give, and the prices need to become more cost reflective.
Okay, so let's touch on those prices a bit more. So it was in January when it was announced that tariff for customers on service bands D and E, those are those who have less than 12 hours of supply per day, were actually frozen and subsidized in line with the policy direction of Nigeria's government. Then, in compliance with the provisions of the Act, the nation's tariff methodology for biannual review, the rates for service bands A, B, C, D, and E would be slightly adjusted about 2 naira to 4 naira per kilowatt hour to reflect the partial impact of inflation. So when you talk about it being cost reflective, and you also talk about it in terms of the investor viewpoint, what happens to the viewpoints of the Nigerian who's paying, of the Nigerian who does not have electricity in their homes, of the Nigerian who does not have electricity in their businesses? Because as we talk about the fact that it's being subsidized and how many hours a day we don't have, it's also costing Nigerian businesses to the tune of $29 billion annually for a lack of electricity. What about that perspective?
Good. So I think the way we look at it, it's the analogy would be a case of the chicken and the egg, which has to come first, right? So for us to have steady power supply in Nigeria, you need to have investments in that sector, right? And how do you get investors to come in? They need to see ab initio from day one that the tariffs that will be in place would be able to sustain their investments, right? So how do you now fix this? I think the Nigerian government has tried to play political at some point with the rates, engaging the Nigerian Labour Congress and all that before they adjust any of their pricing. But at some point, I mean, something has to give. This is what I would say, right? Something has to give. They have to become a more reflective rate. And hopefully, I mean, over time, it's not the best. It's the bane of the Nigerian economy as we see it now. Inflation is shooting through the roof. Living standards are not any better. You're spending more on security and other sectors, living life generally. But if we want to get this right for the power sector, then I think we need to get more investment in. And this is one of the points that has to move.
So in terms of that investment, when all of this was happening and we were moving towards the liberalization of the electricity sector in Nigeria, part of what was agreed in the memorandum was that metering would be done free for all power consumers in the country. We've seen that over the past, well, maybe almost 10 years now, that has not been the case. And metering continues to be one of the biggest issues. So we've seen interventions by the federal government of Nigeria, which have involved direct funding to selected meter companies to import and roll out prepayment meters to electricity consumers. The government has also provided monetary and fiscal incentives such as concessionary funding, duty waivers, duty reductions, and tax waivers. But yet, Nigerians are not still adequately metered. So in this particular situation, because metering will help the investors in the industry to recoup their money.
Exactly.
You'll be able to get the money for what the power is. So why is metering such a difficult thing?
Okay, so maybe we could look at this holistically. From the government perspective, right? They've put these incentives in play. We're aware there's about 120 billion CBN fund for this sector as well. They're giving interest rates at 9% with a moratorium of, say, 2 years for those who invest in this sector. I mean, the government is doing their bit, if we want to look at it that way. The government is doing their bit. You've begun to see some of the some companies coming in who are investing in this metering, in making smart meters and meters in Nigeria in-house.
Indigenous players,
and you would see that there's a ripple effect to this one, right? Then on the second front, which is for the discos, who are supposed to be like the interface with the end users, I can't hold brief for them, really. I think they should be doing more in this sphere. There was a recent report, I won't want to call the name of the disco, but where they said the main reason, I think this came out last week, the main reason for this was KYC and the customers not doing their registration as fast as required. And I thought that was that
means you're not seriously after your own money.
That's what I thought as well, right? But hey, I mean, they may have other concerns, and possibly they may be in the best position to tell us the reasons for this. But for me, it doesn't hold water.
Okay, we'll talk about the work that GVE does in this space, because you're also in the alternative energy space. But let's just stick with this liberalization. It's almost a decade now, about 2013, but it's been since Nigeria returned to democracy, 1999. We've been trying to get a handle on this, different projects, different amounts of monies. The latest ones we know is Siemens has been involved now to help Nigeria work on it. We know that the World Bank has also given about, I think, $750 million in International Development Association credit, also to improve the reliability. But you see a situation where Nigerians still, for the majority, cannot boast of 12 hours of electricity or more. So when it comes to the investments and when it comes to the time the liberalization has taken place, have there been any positive developments? To an extent, but I would say it's not as good as we would want it to be, right? I mean, some of these investments are more long-term. I mean, the engagements with Siemens, we would say it's new.
It's new, right? Maybe mid last year or towards the end of last year that we began to see some of these some of these engagements, right? It will take a little bit of time for them to implement some of these structures. Not just, I mean, there are lots of engineering designs, pre-designs and all that needs to be in place, and assessments before they can roll out. So I expect, that things will begin to move faster, right? But I wouldn't hold my breath much, right? I don't think the government is the best vehicle for this. There should be some engagements with more private sector-led businesses to drive these initiatives.
Okay, we'll take a break here, but we said that this conversation is about solutions. So when we come back, we'll be looking at how to solve Nigeria's electricity woes. And GVE is a player in this space. They could also be providing a solution. This is Business Edge. Stay with us. Still with me is Daniel Wibert. He's the Chief Finance Officer at GVE Projects, and we're looking at solving Nigeria's electricity woes. Now, Daniel, so I'm very sure many Nigerians will not be thrilled to hear that there is some type of tariff review coming into place. We had the situation last year that involved the Nigeria Labour Congress saying that they'd go on strike. That was held back. But then eventually, December, January, some new tariffs came into being. But now we're expecting new tariffs again in July of 2021. Now, the NERC has said that this is being driven by the realities on ground. Those realities include changes in inflation, foreign exchange, gas prices, and available generation capacity. Tell us, how do all of these come together to bring about the price that Nigerians pay for electricity?
Okay, so good. It ties back also to the funds that have been invested to see how they could get their funds back, right? So if, for example, your FX rate was 380, you work the model with 380. And you have to pay back a foreign investor who brought in USD or euros and spent into your economy. And now he has to repatriate that fund back. But now you're seeing that it's you can only get for 480 or 500 for USD. Now, how would they factor this in, right? So something needs to give in terms of pricing, right? They need to change their model, because you're getting the inflow in Naira. The end users paying in Naira, but they need to pay back to their investors, possibly foreign investors, in FX. And then you're going to see that there's a gap that they need to fill, right?
But isn't that pushing that problem down to the consumer, who at no point in time is actually responsible for these changes in inflation and inflationary rates? In fact, many people will even say it's the government's issue because they have not been able to stabilize the Naira versus the dollar.
Yeah, but to be honest, yes, you're pushing it to the end user, but someone has to pay for the inefficiencies in the system. So it's me and you. Sadly, I'm also going to be paying that, right? So, but someone has to pay for these inefficiencies, and sadly, it's going to the end users. The government has been subsidizing it for a bit, and I'm sure they can't do this for that much longer.
So one of the other issues is generation capacity or generated capacity, and we have a pipeline, electricity pipeline issue. Generation and transmission remained fully in the hands of governments, with the transmission company of Nigeria mainly in the hands. Then you have the generation, and you have distribution. There you go.
The Gencos,
and the discos there. So is there a gap? Why can't we fully liberalize the whole sector and take the government out as a player, leaving them as a regulator?
So I think the government really plays more in the TC and the transmission end, right? And they may do this for many reasons, including security as well, right? But I think they've done fairly well in unbundling NEPA or PHCN as we used to know it into the Gencos and the Discos, which are more or less private sector driven, right? And we're beginning to see some efficiencies. There was a peak production it's still literally in my estimate for about 5,800 megawatts just a month ago, which we had never seen before. So we're beginning to sustain. Yes. So these are the inefficiencies that need to be fixed. The issues, funding needs to come in massively into the transmission, right? Even for those that are generating, they can't get all their power generated even to the end users. So a lot of investment still needs to come into the sector.
What will it take for Nigerians to get electricity?
I wish I could.
I wish, many of us wish we could just snap our fingers and many things would change about our countries.
But I think this is why these discussions are ongoing on this one, right? I'll use the telecom sector as an example. So lots of investment had to come in. Lots of investment had to come in. Initially, the pricing to get a phone or even to...
was exorbitant.
Yeah, was quite exorbitant. But after a while, with economies of scale and many of the inefficiencies plugged, you begin to see a reduction in prices. So this is what I feel should happen, right? This is what I emphasize should happen. But at this initial stage, a lot of investment has to come in. And for investment to come in, the investors need to see a more cost-reflective tariff.
Okay, so we know that it's obvious that many Nigerians cannot solely rely on the approved discos for electricity. And this is an area where companies such as GVE, Green Village Electric Projects, comes into play. So tell us, what is it that a company such as your own, an indigenous player in this space, is doing to bridge this gap of electricity deficit, electricity demand for businesses and for Nigerians across the country?
Good point. So thank you. We play in the renewable energy space with a focus more on solar. We develop mini grid sites all across Nigeria, right? We've been in operation for more than a decade now, and we've been making significant strides. So what you say, where can we come in? I'll give an example. There's a project ongoing, the Wuse Market project, for those conversant with this in Abuja. It's arguably the biggest commercial market in that axis. Right, we have a partnership with the franchise owners, the disco, the Abuja disco there, and we're coming together to develop an interconnected 1 megawatt site to power this location for 24/7 hours supply. We've already done a pilot. This is existing in the last 6 months. It's been successful. The traders could give you their feedback. They're excited about it, right? Apart from the savings in their spend, they've seen the climatic impact and the noise as well, right, that has left them, right? So we could begin to see innovations in this sphere, right, where we could come in, partner with the franchise owners, so arguably we are the discos in these places, to come up with many solutions that we could see. We also have the government, to be honest, I think like agencies like the Rural Allocation Agency, they're doing significant work in this sphere, going to different rural economies or peri-urban locations where they feel this need is available, and they're going all out. You see the program by the government, the 5 million solar home program, right? And a part of it is being run by the REA, and they're making significant effort in that stride. So we just need to see more collaboration between players in the renewable energy space and others, right? We'll begin to see working in partnership with the existing discos to ensure that power is delivered to the sites.
Working in concerts with existing discos. Aren't you taking business away from them?
No. Well, I don't know if I should be speaking for the Abuja Disco, but with the pilot we've run, they've seen that the efficiencies that have been gained, they've seen their collection rise, right? They've seen power theft reduce. So they are beginning to see that there are many benefits in working out this model. They're not losing out. They're not entirely, that's why it's an interconnected.
Yes.
Yeah, it's an interconnected agreement in place.
Okay.
And it's a win-win for everyone.
So in terms of Nigerians taking to solar energy, what do you think the uptake has been? Are we interested? I know a lot of people are dissatisfied with constantly having to queue for fuel or to turn on their generators in their homes and their businesses. But on an individual and family level, are Nigerians starting to look towards solar energy?
Oh, they are. Let's look at it with a trend, right? Previously, you would say one of the concerns were that the pricing was a little too high.
Yeah.
But in the last 10 years, we've seen that the price of solar PV and all that has crashed more than 90%. Globally, by international energy bodies, it's stated that it's now cheaper to produce power by these renewable energy sources like solar than even existing coal and other sources, right? So we're beginning to see that this is changing. With improved technology, in battery storage. I mean, we see a lot being done by Tesla and other firms in this space. You begin to see that the use of this is expanding quite.
So I just want to follow up on one thing. So we've seen, as you said, solar power prices have crashed. Alternative energy space is growing around the world. But for us here in Nigeria, what needs to be done? You've talked about collaboration and working in concert. You talked about the Rural Electrification Agency of the federal government. But we still have tariffs on solar panels coming into the country. We still have those small places where we're not making it as easy as it should be for those in the industry and even those who want to use this source of energy. What needs to be done to address that? So
if you ask me, maybe it's a good point. I mean, I could be greedy and say, hey, we want more, right? But some of these tariffs, the basis for this, I mean, this could encourage local production. There are firms who are actually doing this massively now. And they will just need a little bit more support, financing, to be able to help most of these sectors. Of course, we need to look for some of the legislation and regulations guiding this sector to see and help collaborations and more input from renewable energy firms in the sector.
All right, Daniel, we'll stop the conversation there for now, but thank you so much. Looking to solve Nigeria's electricity challenges. And of course, we're trying to do that in terms of identifying where the bottlenecks are, but also to see what we can do in terms of those who are trying to provide alternatives, alternative energy, the space where GVE projects works in. And that is one of the things that we are definitely trying to touch base with. All right. We'll be wrapping things up now, and you know that we do that with NC4 to watch, and let's get straight into that right now. NC4 to watch, these are a few stories that we are keeping our eyes on. We start on the eastern part of the continent. Ethiopian Airlines has installed rapid testing devices at its hub in the capital Addis Ababa amid the growing demand for travel passes and other measures to improve the safety of travelers. This was contained in a statement signed and issued by the airline's country manager in Nigeria. The development allows transit passengers to test and get the results within 3 hours before they get on their flights. South Africa's Employment and Labor Minister has disclosed that his department is currently working on the labor migration policy, which will be tabled in cabinet soon. Speaking at a media briefing this week, the minister said that the policy will regulate and limit sectors on the number of people employers can hire from other countries, especially in sectors that do not require sophisticated skills. Morocco's Minister of Economy, Finance and Administration Reform, Mohammed Ben Chaboun, chaired a committee meeting with representatives from the UN's Millennium Challenge Corporation to discuss updates on the Compact 2 agreement. The U.S. formed the Compact 2 agreement in November of 2015 and stated its aims to improve the quality of human capital and land productivity through digitization in Morocco. The U.S. allocated $450 million and Morocco will match 15% of the contribution. And finally, with NC4 to watch, the African Development Bank Group has announced the 3-year suspension of a Nigerian company, Maxicare Limited, with effect from the 23rd of February 2021. Now, Maxicare is a limited liability company registered in Nigeria. At the expiration of the suspension period, the company will only be eligible to participate in bank group finance projects on the condition that it implements an integrity compliance program consistent with the bank's guidelines. You are, of course, watching Business Edge, and that's today's show for you.